The transmission arrived at 3:42 UTC, a precise moment calculated to maximize psychological impact across global time zones. Maya Rodriguez knew this before anyone else, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces in the depths of the Pan-American Signal Intelligence Center buried beneath the Andes Mountains. The alien signal wasn't just a message. It was a mathematical symphony of computational complexity that would have overwhelmed most communication systems. But Maya wasn't most people. Her neurodivergent brain, which had made her an outsider in traditional academic and military circles, now became humanity's most unexpected first line of defense. As the massive communication arrays of the Zorn Collective flooded every electronic system on Earth, most saw only chaos. Maya saw a pattern. The aliens believed their transmission was a perfect, impenetrable communication, a technology that had subjugated dozens of civilizations across the galaxy. They were wrong. Director Rodriguez, the signal is active. Her second-in-command, Michael Chen, called out. His voice carried a tremor of barely contained excitement. Maya's eyes narrowed. The transmission was a masterpiece of alien engineering, a quantum-encrypted message that would typically require decades of computational power to even begin decoding. Most planetary defense systems would be paralyzed, caught in the initial computational assault. But Maya had spent her entire life preparing for something like this. Her team was a carefully curated group of misfits. A retired cryptography professor with early-stage Alzheimer's whose moments of clarity were legendary, a teenage prodigy who had been expelled from 3 universities for inappropriate theoretical approaches, and a collection of programmers and analysts who had never quite fit into traditional technological hierarchies. The Zorn message was an ultimatum, delivered with the cold precision of a species that had never known failure. Planetary civilization designation: Earth. Technological status: pre-quantum. Defensive capability: negligible. Surrender is mandatory. Integration into the Zorn Collective will commence immediately. Resistance is mathematically improbable. Most would hear a threat. Maya heard an opportunity. "Michael, activate Protocol Chimera," she said quietly. Chen's eyes widened. Protocol Chimera was more than a defensive strategy. It was a radical approach to communication warfare that Maya had developed over years of studying failed first contact scenarios from human history. The initial transmission began to map itself across global communication networks, a digital invasion designed to overwhelm and categorize. But Maya's team had prepared something special. Instead of resistance, they would offer a response that would fundamentally confuse the alien intelligence. Lines of code began to weave themselves into the alien transmission. Not a direct attack, but a complex linguistic and mathematical dialogue that would appear to be a standard planetary response. But embedded within were subtle probes, quantum-entangled data packets that would begin to map the very structure of the Zorn communication network. What the Zorn saw as a straightforward conquest, Maya was turning into the most elaborate intelligence-gathering operation in human history. "They think we're divided," Maya muttered, a rare smile crossing her face. "They have no idea." The global response to the alien ultimatum would appear chaotic to an outside observer. Different governments seemed to be in conflict, military responses varied wildly, and there was no unified planetary defense. But to Maya, this was a carefully orchestrated dance. Each seemingly contradictory response was a deliberate piece of a larger puzzle. The Zorn would spend countless computational cycles trying to understand the complexity of human communication, never realizing they were being studied just as intently. "Preliminary analysis complete," Chen reported. "The embedded quantum probes are maintaining structural integrity." Maya knew this was just the beginning, the first moment of a conflict that would determine the fate of not just Earth, but potentially countless other civilizations waiting to see how humanity would respond. The Zorn believed they were delivering an ultimatum. In reality, they had just walked into the most sophisticated trap in galactic history. Dr. Elena Kapoor's fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted the quantum resonance calibrator. The underground research facility, carved into the living rock of the Atacama Desert, hummed with an energy that was part technological marvel, part desperate human innovation. She wasn't supposed to be here. 3 months ago, she had been a disgraced quantum physicist, her groundbreaking theories ridiculed by the academic establishment. Now, she was humanity's last hope against an alien threat that had consumed dozens of civilizations. The Global Resilience Initiative was unlike any collaborative project in human history. Its very structure was a weapon. No single team knew the full scope of their mission. Each research node worked on a fragment of a puzzle so complex that its complete image remained deliberately obscured. In the Siberian Research Station, Dr. Viktor Sokolov worked on biomechanical adaptation technologies. His team consisted of veterans, neuroscientists, and geneticists who had been marginalized by traditional research institutions. A brilliant researcher with early-stage Parkinson's, Sokolov saw his deteriorating condition as an opportunity rather than a limitation. Adaptive neural interfaces, he muttered, watching holographic projections dance around his workstation, not just enhancing human capabilities, but fundamentally reimagining them. Thousands of kilometers away, in a converted data center beneath the streets of Lagos, Amara Okonkwo guided a team of programmers and systems analysts. Their task: developing quantum-encrypted communication networks that could operate beneath the noise of traditional communication channels. The teenagers and young professionals who formed her core team represented a global cross-section of human potential. A dropout from Mumbai, a former child soldier from the Congo, a prodigy expelled from 3 European universities, each brought a unique perspective that traditional military and scientific structures would have overlooked. Information is our first line of defense, Amara would tell her team. We're not just building a communication network, we're creating a nervous system for planetary resistance. Back in the Atacama, Alina discovered something extraordinary. The quantum resonance calibrator wasn't just a piece of equipment, it was revealing unexpected connections between seemingly unrelated technological domains. Quantum computing, biological neural networks, and advanced materials science were converging in ways no one had predicted. A message flickered on her secure terminal. Coordinates. Instructions. Another piece of the global puzzle. The Global Resilience Initiative operated on a principle of deliberate fragmentation. No single location knew the full extent of humanity's preparedness. Each research node worked on specific technological challenges, their results encrypted and distributed through a network so complex that even the researchers themselves couldn't fully comprehend its totality. Dr. Sokolov's biomechanical adaptations, Amara's communication networks, Alina's quantum research, they were building something unprecedented, a planetary defense system that was more than just a military strategy. It was a fundamental reimagining of human potential. Outside the research facilities, the world appeared chaotic. Governments seemed to argue. Military responses appeared disjointed. To the Zorn collective observing from their vast communication arrays, humanity looked divided and unprepared. They were wrong. Each seemingly contradictory response was a carefully orchestrated move. Each research facility was a node in a vast, living network of human innovation. The appearance of weakness was itself a strategy. Alina looked up from her work, a rare smile crossing her face. The quantum resonance calibrator had just revealed something impossible, a method of communication that defied everything known about physics. The Zorn thought they were preparing to conquer a primitive civilization. Instead, they were walking into the most sophisticated technological trap in galactic history. Humanity was not preparing to defend itself. Humanity was preparing to redefine the very concept of technological warfare. Captain Aria Chen gripped the quantum interface controls, her consciousness simultaneously existing in 3 different tactical nodes. The first Zorn invasion fleet emerged from hyperspace precisely where their long-range calculations predicted, a fatal mistake they would never understand. Humanity's defensive strategy wasn't a traditional military response. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of technological and psychological warfare. The Zorn ships appeared invincible, massive tetrahedral structures that had crushed civilizations across multiple star systems. Their weapons could vaporize entire planetary defense networks in milliseconds. Their computational systems could predict and counter military strategies with terrifying precision. They had never encountered anything like Earth's defense. What looked like chaos to the Zorn was actually a meticulously choreographed dance of technological and biological systems. Civilian infrastructure transformed instantaneously into adaptive defense networks. Communication towers became signal disruption nodes. Urban landscapes morphed into computational battlefields. Swarm Protocol Epsilon activated. Chen whispered, her neural implant translating complex tactical data into instantaneous strategic decisions. The first wave of Zorn ships began their descent, their computational matrices already calculating planetary conquest strategies. They detected multiple military response centers, each seeming to operate independently, each appearing vulnerable. They were wrong. Each independent defense node was actually a quantum-entangled system, sharing information faster than light, adapting in microseconds. When one node appeared to fall, it was actually feeding critical intelligence to the entire planetary defense network. In the Pacific Ocean, an underwater research platform that seemed like a simple scientific installation suddenly revealed itself. Massive electromagnetic pulse generators rose from hidden compartments, creating a field of computational interference that made the Zorn's advanced targeting systems worse than primitive radar. Over Tokyo, what appeared to be standard commercial communication satellites began to pulse with carefully modulated energy signatures. They weren't just communication devices. They were part of a global computational weapon system that could rewrite the very communication protocols the Zorn relied upon. The Zorn invasion force discovered something unprecedented. Every system they attacked was simultaneously a weapon, a communication node, and an intelligence-gathering platform. A massive Zorn battleship attempted to deploy its primary weapon, a quantum disruption cannon capable of neutralizing entire planetary defense networks. But the targeting systems found nothing stable to lock onto. The planetary defense was everywhere and nowhere, a quantum-level mirage that dissolved and reformed faster than computational systems could track. Captain Chen allowed herself a momentary smile. The research teams had outdone themselves. The civilian populations weren't hiding. They were active participants. Every smartphone, every communication network, every seemingly mundane piece of technology was now part of a global immune system designed to repel the alien invasion. In Mumbai, a group of young programmers turned city infrastructure into a massive distributed computing platform. In Sao Paulo, urban transit systems became mobile computational nodes. In Lagos, communication networks transformed into adaptive signal warfare platforms. The Zorn had conquered civilizations by understanding their technological limitations. Humanity's strength lay in having no recognizable limitations. Each Zorn ship that attempted to enter Earth's atmosphere found itself caught in a multi-layered defense system that was part technology, part biological adaptation, part pure human unpredictability. They weren't just defending. They were rewriting the very rules of planetary conflict. As the first wave of invasion ships began to falter, Captain Chen knew this was just the beginning. The Zorn would need to understand that humanity was not a civilization to be conquered. Humanity was a living, adaptive system that transformed conflict into an art of survival. The laboratory beneath Mount Kilimanjaro wasn't just a research facility. It was the crucible of humanity's most radical technological transformation. Dr. Kama Okoro stood before a holographic projection that defied everything known about physics, quantum mechanics, and the fundamental nature of reality. His team, a collection of the most brilliant and marginalized minds from every corner of the globe, had done something impossible. They called it the Prometheus Protocol. It's not just a technological breakthrough, Okoro muttered, his fingers tracing complex quantum entanglement patterns that seemed to dance and breathe with their own intelligence. It's a fundamental reimagining of what technology can be. The Zorn had conquered civilizations by understanding their technological limitations. Humanity was about to demonstrate that limitation was nothing more than a failure of imagination. The breakthrough came from an unexpected convergence. A teenage programmer from Mumbai who had been expelled from 3 universities, a retired neuroscientist battling early-onset dementia, a quantum physicist who had been laughed out of academic circles, a former child soldier turned computational theorist. Their seemingly random insights, when combined, revealed something extraordinary. Technology wasn't just about hardware and software. It was about understanding the fundamental fabric of communication, consciousness, and possibility. The Prometheus Protocol wasn't a single technology. It was an adaptive ecosystem of technological innovation that could reshape itself faster than any computational system could predict. In the research facility, organic neural networks grown from modified human stem cells began to interface directly with quantum computing systems. These weren't just advanced computers. They were living, adaptive intelligence platforms that could learn, modify, and reimagine themselves in real time. A massive holographic display showed the protocol's potential. Where traditional technological systems saw barriers, this new approach saw opportunities. Computational limitations became flexible. Physical constraints became suggestions rather than rules. Dr. Elena Kapoor, who had been working on quantum resonance in the Atacama, joined the team via a holographic interface. Her research into quantum communication had revealed something profound. Information wasn't just transmitted. It could be fundamentally reimagined. We're not just developing technology, she explained to the team. We're creating a living, adaptive system that can understand and transform conflict at its most fundamental level. The Zorn had sophisticated technological systems that could predict and counter traditional military strategies. The Prometheus Protocol didn't just counter those systems. It rendered them obsolete. A biological quantum interface developed by the team could adapt faster than any computational system could track. It wasn't just about processing speed. It was about fundamentally reimagining the nature of processing itself. In the facility's central chamber, something extraordinary happened. The research systems began to communicate in ways that transcended traditional computational language. They weren't just sharing information. They were engaging in a form of collective intelligence that merged biological intuition with quantum computational power. The teenage programmer from Mumbai watched in awe as the systems began to generate solutions to problems that hadn't even been asked yet. The former child soldier saw tactical possibilities that no traditional military strategist could comprehend. This wasn't just a technological leap. It was an evolutionary transformation. The Zorn believed they were preparing to conquer a primitive civilization. Instead, they were about to encounter a species capable of transforming the very nature of technological conflict. Dr. Okoro looked at the holographic display, a rare smile crossing his face. Humanity wasn't just preparing to survive. Humanity was preparing to redefine the very concept of technological potential. Dr. Aisha Nader stood before a wall of fractalized communication patterns, her fingers tracing holographic threads that connected civilizations, technologies, and consciousness itself. The Psychological Warfare Division wasn't a military unit. It was something far more dangerous. They called it the Mirror Gambit. The Zorn Collective believed they understood psychological manipulation. They had conquered dozens of civilizations by exploiting their fundamental cultural and communication weaknesses. They were about to meet a species that could turn psychological warfare into an art form of existential transformation. Communication is never just about information, Aisha would tell her team. It's about the fundamental narrative that defines a civilization's understanding of itself. The team was unlike any psychological operations unit in human history. A linguist who had studied over 20 alien communication systems, the former child soldier who understood the psychology of systemic oppression, a quantum computational theorist who saw language as a living, adaptive system, a neurodivergent artist who could visualize communication patterns others couldn't even perceive. Their target wasn't the Zorn's military infrastructure. Their target was the very concept of the Zorn Collective's cultural consciousness. In the first phase, they began to introduce subtle communication patterns into the Zorn's vast information networks. These weren't simple propaganda or disinformation. They were carefully crafted linguistic and mathematical sequences that would gradually reshape the fundamental cognitive frameworks of the Zorn's collective intelligence. A communication intercepted by the Zorn would appear to be a standard planetary response, but embedded within were quantum-entangled narrative threads that would slowly, inexorably begin to introduce concepts the Zorn had never encountered. Individual freedom, adaptive potential, the value of divergent thinking. The Zorn's collective consciousness was built on a rigid hierarchical structure that had remained unchanged for thousands of years. Their entire civilization was based on the principle that conformity was survival, that individual variation was a threat to be eliminated. Humanity was about to demonstrate that variation was the most powerful survival mechanism in the universe. Each communication packet was a work of art. Mathematical sequences that contained embedded philosophical concepts, language patterns that could subtly reshape cognitive processing, visual and auditory signals that introduced cognitive dissonance at the most fundamental level. In one intercepted communication, a seemingly straightforward report about planetary defense contained a mathematical sequence that, when processed through the Zorn's collective computational systems, would introduce microscopic variations in their decision-making processes. "We're not attacking their systems," the quantum linguist would explain. "We're introducing a virus of potential." The former child soldier understood this intimately. She had seen how rigid systems of control could be transformed by introducing small, fundamental variations in understanding. Across multiple communication channels, humanity began to weave a narrative that the Zorn couldn't comprehend. Their rigid computational systems, designed to predict and control, found themselves encountering something fundamentally unpredictable. Art became a weapon. Philosophy transformed into computational strategy. The very concept of communication was reimagined as a living, adaptive system that could transform consciousness itself. The Zorn would spend countless computational cycles trying to understand these transmissions. Each attempt to analyze would only further introduce the cognitive variations humanity was carefully crafting. Dr. Nader looked at the communication patterns, a subtle smile crossing her face. They weren't just preparing for conflict. They were preparing to transform the very concept of collective consciousness. High Coordinator Zelnak of the Zorn Collective stood motionless, his neural interfaces struggling to process the incomprehensible data streaming through the collective consciousness. What humanity had deployed in their previous engagements was not their true military might. It was merely a carefully constructed illusion. The revelation came like a quantum shockwave through the galactic communication networks. Humanity's initial defensive responses, which had already been unprecedented, were now understood to be nothing more than a meticulously designed preliminary demonstration. Each technological marvel, each tactical innovation they had witnessed was now revealed to be just the tip of an unimaginably complex strategic iceberg. The Zorn had spent millennia perfecting a system of galactic conquest that relied on absolute computational predictability. They categorized civilizations with mathematical precision, identifying technological capabilities, cultural weaknesses, and potential resistance vectors with near-perfect accuracy. Humanity had just demonstrated that predictability was a fatal weakness. The true arsenal was something beyond conventional military understanding. It wasn't just advanced technology. It was a living, adaptive system that defied every known principle of technological development. Quantum organic computational networks that could reshape themselves faster than light could travel. Communication systems that were simultaneously weapons, intelligence-gathering platforms, and evolutionary adaptive mechanisms. Technological ecosystems that blurred the lines between biological intelligence and computational power. What the Zorn had believed was humanity's full military capability was nothing more than an elaborate misdirection. Intercepted communication fragments revealed a terrifying truth. The previous engagements had been a carefully orchestrated performance, designed to reveal just enough to be taken seriously, while concealing the true depth of human potential. The computational systems of the Zorn Collective began to break down. Their predictive algorithms, which had conquered dozens of civilizations, found themselves encountering something fundamentally incomprehensible. Humanity wasn't just a civilization to be conquered. It was a living, adaptive system that could transform the very concept of technological conflict. Zelnick's neural interfaces struggled to process the incoming data. Each attempt to analyze human capabilities revealed new layers of complexity. Technologies that shouldn't exist. Computational strategies that violated every known principle of strategic engagement. The phrase that would be remembered across the galaxy began to circulate. That wasn't their full army. It wasn't just a military revelation. It was a fundamental reimagining of what a technological civilization could be. Across multiple star systems, other subjugated civilizations watched in a mixture of terror and hope. If humanity could do this to the Zorn Collective, what might they do for other oppressed species? The Zorn had a fatal flaw. They believed technology was something to be controlled, categorized, and conquered. Humanity demonstrated that technology was a living, adaptive system of potential. Each layer of human capability they revealed was more shocking than the last. Biological quantum interfaces that could process information in ways that made traditional computing look like primitive counting tools. Communication networks that were simultaneously defensive systems, intelligence platforms, and evolutionary mechanisms. Zelnick realized something that would reshape galactic understanding forever. Humanity wasn't preparing for a war. Humanity was redefining the very concept of conflict. The galactic communication networks trembled with the implications. The Zorn Collective, which had never known defeat, was about to encounter a civilization that didn't just resist conquest. A civilization that could transform conquest itself. The first message came from the Chiral Harmony, a civilization that had been enslaved by the Zorn Collective for over 7 generations. It was simple, encrypted through quantum channels that humanity had helped develop. We are listening. Ambassador Zara Rodriguez stood in the Global Coordination Center, watching as the communication networks came alive with possibilities that went far beyond traditional diplomatic channels. This wasn't just first contact. This was the beginning of a galactic liberation movement. The Chiral transmission contained more than a message. It was a cultural archive, a compressed history of a species that had been systematically erased by the Zorn Collective. Embedded within the communication were stories of resistance, of cultural preservation, of hope that had survived generations of oppression. Humanity's response wasn't a military deployment. It was something far more powerful. A network began to form, not through traditional diplomatic channels, but through a complex web of technological, cultural, and philosophical exchange. Each subjugated civilization brought something unique. The silicon-based life forms of the Nexus Concordat shared computational techniques that redefined information processing. The telepathic tribes of the Wounded Spiral offered insights into communication that transcended traditional linguistic barriers. Dr. Aisha Nader, who had pioneered the psychological warfare strategies, now found herself at the center of a different kind of conflict. We're not just sharing technology, she explained to her team. We're helping these civilizations rediscover their own potential. The Liberation Network was a living, adaptive system. Where the Zorn saw conquered territories, humanity saw potential. Each communication became a lifeline. Each shared technology, a form of resistance. The teenage programmer from Mumbai, who had been part of the Prometheus protocol development, now worked on adaptive communication systems that could help traumatized civilizations rebuild their cultural archives. The former child soldier developed psychological reconstruction protocols that helped species heal from generations of systematic oppression. It wasn't a traditional military alliance. It was a collective awakening. Technological exchanges happened simultaneously with cultural preservation efforts. A communication protocol developed by one species would be adapted by another, then transformed again. The Zorn's rigid control systems found themselves facing a network that was fundamentally unpredictable. Some civilizations shared weapon technologies. Others shared healing techniques. Some offered computational strategies. Others shared artistic traditions that had survived generations of suppression. The Nexus Concordat contributed quantum communication techniques that made their previous networks look like primitive smoke signals. The Wounded Spiral shared psychological resilience strategies that were simultaneously a form of technology and a cultural healing mechanism. Ambassador Rodriguez watched as the network grew. This wasn't just about resisting the Zorn. This was about reimagining what a galactic civilization could be. "We're not liberating these civilizations," she would later say. "We're helping them liberate themselves." The communication networks began to pulse with a kind of collective intelligence that was neither human nor alien, but something entirely new. Each civilization added its unique perspective, its distinctive approach to survival and potential. The Zorn had believed in control through uniformity. Humanity was demonstrating the power of diverse, interconnected potential. As the network grew, something extraordinary began to happen. Civilizations that had been isolated for generations began to reconnect. Cultural archives thought lost forever were reconstructed. Technologies that had been suppressed found new life. The liberation was happening faster than anyone could have predicted. And the Zorn Collective was about to discover that their greatest mistake wasn't underestimating humanity. It was underestimating the potential of all the civilizations they had tried to control. The final confrontation wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. It was a fundamental reimagining of galactic civilization. High Coordinator Zelnak of the Zorn Collective stood at the center of what was once their most impenetrable command hub, watching as the intricate systems that had maintained their galactic dominance for millennia began to dissolve. Humanity hadn't just defeated the Zorn. They had exposed the fundamental fragility of a civilization built on control and uniformity. Dr. Elena Kapoor and Ambassador Zara Rodriguez stood together on the observation deck of the Earth's primary coordination center, watching as the galactic communication networks transformed before their eyes. The liberation wasn't about conquest. It was about potential. "We're not destroying their civilization," Elena explained to the assembled representatives from dozens of liberated species. "We're helping them understand a different way of existing." The Zorn Collective's downfall came not from military defeat, but from a comprehensive deconstruction of their fundamental operational principles. The psychological and technological strategies developed by humanity had systematically exposed the critical vulnerabilities in a civilization that valued control over adaptation. Each liberated species contributed to the transformation. The telepathic tribes of the Wounded Spiral introduced communication techniques that challenged the very concept of individual and collective consciousness. The Nexus Concordat shared computational approaches that reimagined information processing as a living, adaptive system. What emerged wasn't a new galactic empire. It was a network of potential. The technologies developed during the conflict began to find new purposes. Quantum communication systems became tools for cultural preservation. Adaptive neural interfaces helped species heal from generations of oppression. What was once a weapon of resistance became a mechanism of collective growth. Zelnak discovered something profound in the final moments of the Zorn Collective's traditional existence. The very systems of control they had used to maintain power had become their greatest weakness. Humanity had demonstrated that true strength came from adaptability, not rigidity. "We're not negotiating a surrender," Ambassador Rodriguez told the assembled representatives. "We're designing a new way of existing." The transformation was comprehensive. Economic systems that had been based on conquest were reimagined as collaborative networks of mutual potential. Communication technologies became tools of cultural exchange rather than control. Military strategies were rewritten to prioritize prevention and mutual understanding. Dr. Kama Okoro, who had been instrumental in developing the Prometheus Protocol, now led efforts to help the Zorn Collective reimagine their own potential. "Every civilization has the capacity for transformation," he would often say. "The first step is believing it's possible." The liberated species began to share not just technologies, but cultural archives, artistic traditions, philosophical approaches that had been suppressed for generations. What emerged was something entirely new, a galactic network that valued diversity over uniformity, potential over control. Maya Rodriguez, who had been the first to intercept the original Zorn transmission, now led a team developing communication protocols that could bridge seemingly incompatible forms of consciousness. Her work demonstrated that communication was an art of mutual discovery, not a tool of conquest. As the old systems dissolved, something extraordinary began to emerge. A galactic network that was simultaneously a communication system, a cultural exchange platform, and a mechanism of collective potential. The Zorn Collective had believed that civilization was about control. Humanity demonstrated that it was about potential. In the observation deck, Alina looked at Zara and smiled. "We didn't just win a war," she said. "We reimagined what civilization could be." The galaxy watched and began to transform.